Before he ever uttered the words, "I'll be back," Arnold Schwarzenegger was just another muscle-bound star trying to escape the shadow of his own biceps. And the Terminator? Just a low-budget sci-fi thriller directed by a relatively unknown filmmaker with big ideas and an even bigger gamble. But what happened behind the scenes of the Terminator wasn't just filmmaking. It was transformation, obsession, risk, pain, dedication, a perfect storm of creative instinct and relentless discipline that took a former Mr. Olympia and made him immortal. This is the untold story of how the Terminator was forged, frame by frame, scar by scar, and line by legendary line. 1. The role no one wanted. When James Cameron sat down to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger for lunch, he didn't plan to offer him the role of the Terminator. In fact, he wanted him to play Kyle Reese, the human hero, the guy with a gun and a heart. But Arnold, he saw it differently. "I don't think I'm the right guy," he told Cameron. "But let me tell you how the villain should move." Arnold wasn't trying to sell himself as the killing machine, but with every word, he became it, describing movements that were cold, calculated, emotionless. He spoke about the Terminator not as a man, but as a force, a program in a body. No hesitation, no empathy, just mission execution. James Cameron sat across the table, listening, fascinated. He had come to lunch to discuss the hero of the story, Kyle Reese. But halfway through the meal, his instincts screamed something else entirely. "You shouldn't be the hero," Cameron finally said, leaning forward. "You should be the Terminator." It was a moment that changed both their lives. Arnold hesitated. This wasn't the kind of role leading men took. The character barely spoke. No grand monologues, no romantic subplots, just a silent, relentless pursuit. His agent was furious, warned that this would kill his budding Hollywood image, one he'd worked so hard to build after Conan the Barbarian. He was supposed to be the next big action hero, not some faceless robot assassin. But Arnold saw what they didn't. He understood that presence could speak louder than dialogue. That menace, when controlled, was more powerful than chaos. He told Cameron, "If done right, the villain steals the movie." And he was absolutely right. Arnold had been underestimated his entire life, from immigrant to bodybuilder to actor. But what people didn't see was the mind beneath the muscles. He wasn't just thinking about the role, he was calculating its impact. He envisioned a character that would haunt audiences long after the credits rolled. A being that didn't just kill but defined fear. Cameron, impressed by Arnold's understanding of the character, rewrote the script to lean into his imposing physicality. The character became colder, more streamlined, less human. The limited lines made every gesture more meaningful, every silence more loaded. It wasn't just about acting. It was about transforming stillness into suspense. And that's exactly what Arnold did. In the end, the man who barely spoke in the movie ended up being the loudest presence on screen. And off. The gamble paid off. The villain became the star. And Arnold Schwarzenegger became a legend. And he was right. With just 17 lines of dialogue, he didn't just steal the movie, he became it. 2. Becoming the machine. To play a cyborg convincingly, you can't just act, you become. Arnold studied animals, cold-blooded ones, lizards, snakes. The way they move, slow and deliberate. He practiced robotic movements for hours in the mirror. His stare, his head turns, all his ideas. He trained to load guns blindfolded, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Every reload, every twitch, every breath was engineered for mechanical perfection. The gun wasn't a prop. It was an extension of the machine. He taped his fingers together to limit movement, forcing a grip that felt more mechanical than human. His goal wasn't just to act like a machine, it was to move like one, to be one. Every twitch, every reload, every moment had to be deliberate. There was no room for natural reflexes. Machines don't flinch. They don't pause. They just execute. Arnold trained obsessively. He didn't just work with prop guns. He trained with real firearms, under the watchful eyes of military experts and professional armorers. Over and over, he practiced loading, cocking, and firing weapons until it was burned into his muscle memory. He even blindfolded himself to get it perfect without sight. Every move needed to look cold, programmed, efficient. By the time the cameras rolled, he wasn't just an actor holding a gun. He was the Terminator, armed with muscle memory that rivaled seasoned professionals. On set, stuntmen and crew members began to take notice. Some said he could handle a shotgun smoother than men who'd spent years working in action cinema. And then came the police station massacre, one of the most unforgettable sequences in sci-fi history. Amid chaos, screaming, and flashing muzzle fire, Arnold remained unshaken. Literally, he didn't blink, he didn't react, he didn't break focus. While blanks exploded inches from his face, Arnold stared forward with the dead eyes of a machine on a mission. Crew members later admitted they were unnerved. Extras were visibly rattled. What was supposed to be a movie suddenly felt real. And that was exactly what Arnold wanted. He believed if he could convince those standing just feet away that he was an unstoppable force, then the audience watching through a lens would feel it tenfold. The lack of blinking, the stiff posture, the absence of human error, it wasn't just performance. It was programming. It was one of the hardest things he had ever done, harder than any bodybuilding contest or stage performance. This wasn't about size, it was about stillness, about perfecting the tiniest details. Because in those small details, Arnold knew was where true terror lived. He didn't just play the Terminator, he became it. 3. The iconic shades? Total accident. What's more Terminator than those black, wraparound sunglasses? Funny thing is, they were never in the script. Originally, the idea was that the Terminator wouldn't wear anything on his face. But once prosthetics were applied to simulate a cybernetic eye, the flaws were obvious: wires, makeup seams, lighting issues. The fix? Sunglasses. And not just any pair. After trying multiple styles, they landed on a pair of mirrored wraparound gargoyles. Cheap, sleek, perfect. Not only did they hide makeup imperfections, they turned the character into a walking legend. Those shades reflected nightclub lights like mirrors of doom. They made him faceless, soulless, a hunter that saw you, but you couldn't see it. Years later, every sequel would carry on the shades as tradition. Other movies copied the look, and Arnold, he kept several pairs, still brings them out at conventions. Sometimes style is born from a mistake, and those glasses, they made the Terminator look like death on two legs. For words of steel, nice night for a walk, wash day tomorrow, simple phrases, cold delivery, and suddenly they sound like death sentences. Arnold obsessed over line delivery. Cameron told him, "Less is more." So Arnold trained his voice to sound less human. He flattened his Austrian accent even more, repeated every line hundreds of times into a tape recorder, erased contractions, spoke like a machine, not a man. One fight nearly changed history. The line, "I'll be back." Arnold didn't like it. He said a robot wouldn't use contractions. He wanted to say, "I will be back." Cameron disagreed. "Trust me," he said. Arnold reluctantly shot it both ways. "I will be back," he said, as he had insisted. A robotic, stiff, grammatically formal version he believed better suited a machine. Then, almost as a throwaway, he followed Cameron's instruction and delivered the line with the contraction, "I'll be back." The moment was brief, just a few seconds in a dimly lit police station. But something happened. The crew, hardened professionals who'd seen dozens of shootouts, chases, and death scenes unfold on sound stages, froze. They laughed, yes, but it wasn't humor. It was tension. It was the sudden realization that three simple words had hit like a punchline with a razor edge. It was cold. It was final. It was a promise. "I'll be back." No one knew it then, but that line was about to become one of the most quoted, imitated, and enduring pieces of dialogue in cinema history. Arnold didn't expect it. He thought people would forget it as quickly as they heard it, just a filler line before the Terminator drove a car through a wall. But they didn't forget. Everyone remembered. Fans shouted it at him on the street. Comedians built punchlines around it. It showed up in The Simpsons, in presidential speeches, in comic books, commercials, and campaign slogans. It transcended the Terminator. It defined Arnold. Even he leaned into it, turning the phrase into his personal stamp. He delivered it in sequels, in interviews, in press tours. It followed him like a shadow, but he never ran from it. Because he understood something vital. Sometimes greatness isn't in complexity, it's in clarity. And in just 3 words, that line captured the essence of the character, the movie, and the man. It wasn't just a quote, it was a brand, a legend, a cultural bullet fired into eternity. "I'll be back." One line. 3 words. Immortality. 5. Real flames, real pain. When the Terminator walks out of an explosion with his eyebrows scorched off, it's a moment burned into movie history. What most fans don't know, those are Arnold's real eyebrows. He stood in front of a real flame rig. No CGI, no doubles. His brows were coated in gel. The fireball was timed to the second. He held his breath, stepped forward, and felt every hair singe. The shot was perfect. One take. And yes, he paid the price. His eyebrows were patchy for weeks. While filming pickups around Los Angeles, people would stop him in the street thinking he'd been in a real accident. He smiled and said, "I've been fighting the future." And that's the kind of dedication that separates actors from icons. The pain was real, but so was the reward. 6. Guerrilla marketing. Back then, Arnold wasn't the box office titan we know today. He was still the guy from Conan the Barbarian, known more for pecs than performance. So he took matters into his own hands. Literally, he used his fame in bodybuilding to promote the Terminator, did interviews with muscle magazines in costume, visited gyms in full leather and shades, saying, "I am the Terminator. Come see me." No paycheck for that, just hustle. And it worked. Young men who didn't even like sci-fi showed up to theaters. The buzz exploded. The movie grossed over $78 million on a tiny budget. Arnold's image was suddenly everywhere. He wasn't just selling muscles anymore. He was selling cinema, and doing it with a grin. 7. Living the part. Arnold didn't just play the Terminator, he became him, even off-set. One night, he walked into a restaurant in full makeup. Metal eye exposed, fake blood running down his cheek, bullet holes in his jacket. People screamed. The manager almost called the police. Arnold? He calmly ordered a steak. He said it helped him stay in character, practicing stiffness, emotionless speech, robotic stillness. Another time, a driver almost crashed after seeing Arnold standing alone under a streetlight, completely still. Kids on set were too scared to approach him. He'd wait, unmoving, then slowly turn his head like a machine. He said those moments gave him confidence. If people believed it in real life, they'd believe it on screen. 8. The grind never stops. While filming stretched late into the night, often under harsh lights, loud effects, and endless retakes, Arnold still made time for the gym. When most actors would crash into bed after a grueling shoot, he was just getting started. At 3 or 4 a.m., while the rest of the cast and crew slept, Arnold would quietly sneak out of his hotel, find the nearest gym, and start lifting. Sometimes, when that wasn't possible, he'd ask the crew to unlock local gyms, or even do bodyweight training between takes. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. There were no paparazzi in those midnight sessions. No Instagram, no spotlight. It wasn't about vanity. It was about authenticity. Arnold believed the Terminator shouldn't just act like a machine, it should look like one too. He envisioned a physique that wasn't bulky for show, but engineered like precision machinery. No bloated muscles, no fluff, just sinew, strength, and symmetry. He maintained an extreme diet throughout production. Steak, chicken, eggs, and protein shakes. No sugar, no processed food, no alcohol. He monitored his water intake, tracked his macros before tracking macros was a thing. His workouts were short, punishing bursts, low reps, heavy compound lifts, laser-focused. The result? The leather jacket used in the film clung to him so perfectly, the costume designers called it a second skin. When he takes off his sunglasses and you see the vascular arms, the striated shoulders, that's not prosthetics. That's real. Every vein, every cut, every twitch. And this wasn't just about staying in shape. It was about staying in character. Machines don't sag. They don't bulk and bloat. They are tight, efficient, purpose-built. Arnold said it best himself. The machine doesn't get tired, so neither do I. It wasn't easy. There were days when the exhaustion was unbearable, but he refused to let his body break the illusion. Every time the camera turned on, it had to show something that looked unstoppable, indestructible. That was the standard he set for himself, and the image he etched into cinematic history. Sometimes legends aren't forged on camera. They're built at 4 a.m., under fluorescent lights, with no audience but a mirror. 9. Ride like a cyborg. The image is burned into cinematic history. The Terminator on a Harley, shotgun in hand, chasing destiny. But in reality, Arnold didn't know how to ride a motorcycle before filming. He trained with professional riders for weeks, learned to mount, balance, brake, and steer like a robot, not a man. Even practiced one-handed shotgun reloads while steering, in full leather. At night, insurance companies panicked. Arnold insisted on doing it himself. He watched playback after playback, adjusting posture and movement until it felt mechanical. And when cameras rolled, he nailed it. That wasn't a man riding a bike. That was a machine on a mission. 10. The line that echoes forever. I'll be back. 3 simple words. Just another line in the script. Nothing flashy. No fanfare. Almost cut entirely. Arnold didn't like it. Said it sounded too human, too casual, something a regular guy would say, not a cybernetic assassin. He argued with Cameron. It should be, I will be back. A machine wouldn't use contractions. Arnold wanted the delivery to feel cold, lifeless, robotic, but Cameron stood his ground. Just say it, he insisted. Trust me. So Arnold did. He delivered it flat, emotionless, like code coming from a processor instead of a man. It didn't feel special in the moment. Just another take, another scene, another flicker of celluloid. But then something happened. The moment hit. On set, the crew reacted, not with applause, but with a quiet jolt, a nervous chuckle, a sense that they had just witnessed something different. No one could quite explain why. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it stuck. It echoed in their heads long after the scene wrapped. Then the film came out, and suddenly the whole world was saying it. I'll be back. It became more than a line. It became a phenomenon, quoted by children and politicians, printed on bumper stickers, t-shirts, coffee mugs, parroted in cartoons, echoed on late-night talk shows, whispered in boardrooms, even uttered in the halls of the White House. Arnold embraced it, at first reluctantly, then with full force. He repeated it in sequels, referenced it in speeches. It became his signature, a line that transcended cinema and embedded itself into global culture. Why did it resonate so deeply? Because it wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a promise, a warning, prophecy. It said everything the Terminator represented: unrelenting purpose, inevitability, and an ironclad guarantee that no matter what you threw at him, he would return. Without that line, Arnold might have been another muscle-bound action star in a sea of many. But with it, he became immortal. No matter how many times you kill the Terminator, he'll always be back. The Terminator wasn't just a movie. It was lightning in a bottle, built from scraps, shot with passion, held together by sweat, fire, and the silent steel will of a man who believed he could do more than flex for a camera. Arnold didn't just act, he transformed. And what began as a role no one wanted became the performance that changed cinema forever. He had few lines, but every movement spoke volumes. He had no heart, but he became legend. This is the real story of the Terminator. And trust us, he'll be back.